What's up, guys? Coach Caglione here. If this is your first time stopping by, I'm Coach Caglione. I've been involved with powerlifting and strength coaching for over 19 years. So outside of a training update, I wanted to kind of take this time to just kind of discuss some of the equipment I'm using on a regular basis, and especially when it comes to the context of peaking and also just kind of building strength for a really long time. Again, I've been training with weights since around 2001. I've been competing since 2006, about 2 decades in to competing. And I do believe one of the reasons why I've been able to make kind of progress into, my mid to late 30s, still hitting all-time PRs in some lifts, in some regards. Some of my best training and some of my best competitions have kind of come after weight loss, after doing a bodybuilding show, after a lot of things. So anyways, one of the things I want to kind of discuss is the use of accommodating resistance, and in particular chains. I think chains are a very underutilized tool. They've kind of fallen out of favor when it comes to powerlifting, and also just in the context of just like, I guess longevity is kind of a buzzword, but essentially the weights are going to be lighter in the bottom, heavier at the top. So that can be a very useful strategy when it comes to peaking, allowing your nervous system to kind of adapt to loads slowly over time. So a lot of times I'll kind of modulate the amount of chain weight I use in a given training cycle. Anywhere from like 10 to 20% of your max is kind of a good place to start, and you can kind of adjust up or down depending on what your goals are. On this particular day, I forgot what my top sets were, but essentially like on my squats, I used 80 pounds of chain. So if you're like a 400 to 500 pound squatter, 80 pounds of chain is great. And I kind of might modulate that up or down. I think in the week, the next week, you'll kind of see I use around like 130 pounds of chain. But for example, anywhere from like 80 to like 120, even upwards of 160. Once you start to get to like, 200 plus, where if the chain load starts to kind of get more than 30% if you want it at max, there are some like different benefits to that, but I think it starts to get a little bit overkill, and where it might be a little bit harder to determine your actual strength level. But in terms of unloading your lower back especially, but also if you have any like knee or hip issues, chains can be a great way to kind of work around that, and just be a great way to kind of train your nervous system. Other things you'll kind of see, which you won't see now, but using the buffalo bar, I think, is a very underutilized tool. And even if you're not a competitive lifter, some people, like I've kind of advocated for this in the past. If you're like an athlete, if you're just kind of a strength enthusiast, I think like a safety bar is great, but I still think there are a lot of benefits to using like a buffalo bar, because you could still get a little bit tighter, get a little bit more stable with your upper back, and you kind of can't cheat the lift. So anyways, a buffalo bar is definitely something I would consider. So here's a setup, and I'm also using the daisy straps for these particular lifts. So using the chains for overhead press has been kind of interesting, because it can be very unstable toward the top. And I think overhead press is definitely kind of unique, where you're starting from the bottom, much like a deadlift. So it's just a little bit of a different feel in terms of like using the chains and stuff like that. So, and I've kind of found with myself too, with the overhead press, it's not really like a cut and dry, like kind of starting point. Like I said, like I'm kind of floating the weight a little bit. I think most people kind of are like under the agreement where as long as it's kind of starting below your chin, it's like considered a full range of motion. Whereas I think anyways, that's kind of my understanding, but I try to kind of just get my elbows up and in as much as I can. And again, using the chains starting from like this, so the chains are going to be completely unloaded on the ground, and then it kind of works out pretty well where they kind of fully unload. So there's about 40 pounds of chain. So this is a little bit more chain weight than maybe is necessary, so I may not modulate the chain weight too much on the overhead press. But this is, again, usually things tend to get kind of sticky around the eye level for myself, and also from people, what I've seen. I'm not like an overhead press aficionado by any means, but the chains have been definitely kind of helping build my lockout, and also just a little bit more confidence with some heavier weights overhead. And I think when it comes to like overhead stability, it's like kind of like something that kind of gets chatted about a lot. whether it's you're in the sports performance world or kind of just the fitness world, and just kind of having some like unstable load overhead can be kind of helpful for your rotator cuff to fire properly and just kind of your scapula to be kind of working efficiently. So I do think there's a lot of benefit for kind of pressing with chains. And people will do overhead press with like a bamboo bar and things like that. But again, another great way you can kind of use chains in training. I've had a lot of success. So I'd say for pressing, I'll probably use anywhere from like 20 to 40 pounds of chains, maybe even a little bit less. We have lighter chains that are like, I believe they're 14 pounds a piece. So like that's something I'll consider. But anywhere from like 20 to 40 pounds for pressing movements I'll typically use. And then for lower body movements, 40 pounds on the low end. Sometimes I'll use 40 pounds like on the deadlift. I've been using a little bit less chain weight on the deadlift just because my start has not been as powerful since I've kind of, even though I've gained some weight back, I'm still considerably lighter. Even me being at 275, it's still a far cry from me being at 340. So when I was a super heavyweight, my lockout was like the worst. But now again, even just, if I'm like under 290, the lighter I get, usually the worse my kind of start is. I've definitely had some of my best deadlifts in like the 250 range. So it's kind of interesting. I've pulled 700 at 290. I've pulled, I'm trying to think of I was probably like 255 when I pulled 701 pounds, maybe a little bit lighter. I'd have to double check. Maybe it might have been in the 245 range because I ended up kind of competing in the 220s after that. So I'm not exactly sure what I was, but mid 200s usually pull really well. But anyways, now this is just some training with the Hampton bar. I've been kind of trying to figure out where my strength is at with this bar and just trying to kind of learn it a little bit. The grooves are a lot less aggressive. You will see kind of in the back, I do have kind of an ability to kind of do reverse band. I don't believe I do any chains on this particular day. I did chains last week, in the week prior that you saw, but sometimes I'll set up the chains in the middle. Sometimes I'll set up the chains on the ends. Kind of just depends. If I'm on the platform, I usually try to keep the chains off the platform. If I'm just on the horse stall mats, then no big deal about the chains kind of making contact. But if you have a wood platform, I would just kind of be careful with using chains. That'd be kind of the only consideration because that can definitely beat up the platform over time. So that's something to consider. Again, to be honest, I'm not really a fan of wood platforms. Not really, especially when it comes to deadlifting and stuff. But the wood platform has been working great for our strict curl training. But again, just something to consider there. So I've been one of the things I've been kind of experimenting with. This is not a commentary on equipment, but one of the things I know with the Hampton bar specifically, really just feels like kind of a dead weight, and I have to kind of really accelerate through the motion. So one thing I've been trying to do, you can kind of see if you've ever followed John Cooper's training and a lot of great lifters, they'll tend to kind of pull a little bit higher up, maybe more so than they need to initially, and then kind of let the weight drop. I've never personally done that just because I feel like I'm losing some tightness, but if you can kind of time it right, the thing is you have to you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit because you're kind of hoping that the judge is going to give you a start command when you're fully extended. So anyways, it's something I'm just going to experiment with. I'm not sure if it's something I'm going to stick with. I think it's again, you're still kind of putting your start a little bit more in the judge's hands versus if you're just able to kind of get in your starting position and just kind of wait for the commands. I think that's a little bit more something you could replicate. But anyways, you can kind of see here that I'm trying to kind of pull the weight in and just kind of letting it drop slightly and then starting the curl, lengthening my arm. But in any case, regardless of what I end up doing, I am trying to get my arms a little bit longer at the start. You can kind of see I'm almost relaxing and then kind of slingshotting the weight up. So again, I am going to need to get a start command. So again, there's going to be a timing element there, but so far that's been feeling good. The one thing that I do like about that is you're able to, I guess the one positive of getting your arms longer, obviously it's longer range of motion, but you're able to kind of get the weight moving a little bit faster. I've kind of mentioned before, if you look at lifters like Michael Oliver and some of the great, strict curlers, a lot of them are a little bit more wiry and they have more time to get the pole moving. So you'll see this with Olympic lifting a lot. Sometimes the taller athletes will really kind of take advantage of kind of getting the bar moving faster. So again, the shorter lifters obviously have the advantage. And you can see this was, I think, like 155, which was pretty challenging. But the taller lifters are going to have the advantage of getting the bar moving. And I've been doing the seated curls with some different heights, sometimes with back support, sometimes not. But this is with a wide grip, and I'm trying to, again, build up my capacity a little bit with a more of a disadvantaged position here. And then you'll kind of see I'm doing some deadlifts with some chains. With the deadlifts, I've been a little bit like kind of lazy, and I've been kind of putting the chains on after. It's not something I necessarily recommend, but again, the deadlifts can be, I think chain deadlifts especially, it's going to kind of help you kind of learn to accelerate the weight. So that can be like kind of really beneficial for developing power, and especially if you have like a stickier lockout or like a stickier transition in the middle, the chains can really kind of teach you to accelerate all the way through. So you guys will see that in a moment. But I do definitely suggest, when it comes to peaking, when it comes to training for strength, I do think that, utilizing chains in your training can be a really good tool. And I think that also this was the first, it's hard for me to tell. I do believe this is an Alico stiff bar. But yeah, I've been transitioning to, using the stiff bar a little bit more in training. The big difference on the stiff bar, you're not going to be able to pull the slack out as much. It's not going to have much give at the start of the lift. It's going to be a little bit slower off the floor, but the advantage is it is going to be a little bit more stable. You're not going to have to deal with, kind of the bar kind of throwing you downward, which you'll kind of see that happens a lot with the Kabuki bar especially. So the stiffer the bar is, when it comes to deadlifting, strict curls, and things of that nature, it's going to be more stable, but again, typically, like, you won't be able to do quite as much weight. So something to consider. And when it comes to like a squat bar or like a bench bar and things of that nature, same thing. You'd want those things to be like, stiffer. You don't really want it, but some athletes can time the whip. So there's advantages and disadvantages, but the main thing is that the timing is going to be different. So in this particular day, I think I worked up to like 435, and then I just kind of added chains and did some volume. So nothing too crazy heavy on this particular day. I kind of mentioned that my back hasn't been feeling the best when I've been deadlifting. But the chains are going to, help me kind of accelerate. I've been kind of sticky around kind of like the knee area. That's when the back's been not feeling the best. So I'm hoping, training the RDLs. I've been doing some direct lower back work. I've been adding a little bit more core work. I've definitely been lazy, honestly, for like the past 2-3 years even, but definitely 2 years with my core training. So I think I just need to kind of get back to doing some of that, and maybe even just really basic stuff like planks, side planks, body saws, stir the pot, a lot of stuff that's just, more kind of bracing emphasis. But I have been doing some kind of standing abs, cable abs, and I have been doing some hanging leg raises here and there. Sometimes I've just been so fatigued just by the end of the sessions, and I've been kind of slacking on that. But in any case, that's just why I like to use chains in my peaking training as well as my strength training. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, stay strong. See you soon.